All right, coming up today, we're going to take on the muscles of the shoulders and the arms. All right, so as we begin with the muscles of the upper arm, we really are talking about the shoulder girdle, which we have already started. Remember, we have the pectoralis major tying into the arm. We have the lat coming up and tying into the arm. We have teres major, we have teres minor, we have infraspinatus and supraspinatus. All of these muscles are already tying into what would, I guess, properly be considered the shoulder girdle. So as we move down into the arm, we're still going to tie back into the scapula a couple of times here. What I want to take on first is one that's pretty well hidden, but since we want to come up to the surface, I want to take the deeper ones first. Although this is one, if the arm is raised, you might see a line for this muscle underneath the arm. It's called the Coracobrachialis, and it extends from the coracoid process. If you remember, that's where we attached, for example, the pectoralis minor. Right? So it's going to come down here, and it's going to come about halfway down the arm on the inside of the humerus here. And it's a fairly narrow strap. Now, it's going to be, if we were looking at it with this view, we would actually see it come down in front of the lat. So we'd actually see that there. And that's because we have the pectoralis major not on that arm. Okay? But over here is the coracobrachialis. That's going to sit behind pectoralis, but come in front of the lat. Come down this way. From that process down into the inside of the humerus here. Coracobrachialis. Let's take on the muscle of the brachialis next. This is part of the flexors. It's part of the muscles on the front of the arm. You've probably heard of the bicep. That's coming up next. Biceps Brachii is actually what it's called. It sits mostly on top of the brachialis, but we'll draw that in first and put the bicep on top. So the brachialis is going to attach along the arm here. The belly, it's going to attach up in here, and it's going to attach along the whole middle of the arm, coming on down. And its primary attachment point is to the ulna. Remember, the ulna had this big attachment to the elbow. But we really want to think about the brachialis as attaching to the ulna. All right, this is the brachialis. So we could take that on over here too. So coming down, attaching along the middle of the arm here into primarily the primarily the ulna. And the brachialis is coming over and attaching to this tuberosity of the ulna. So what that's going to look like on the side view here is we'll have the brachialis attaching about halfway down and hooking on to the ulna right inside of the radius there. Brachialis. All right, let's go for the other flexor of the upper arm. That would be the Biceps Brachii, which will attach, actually not, it sits here, but it's going to attach in the lower arm and it's going to attach in the shoulder blade. This muscle has two heads. They call it a long head and a short head. The long head is going to attach in what's called the supraglenoid cavity, which is, the glenoid cavity is the socket, the shallow socket for the humerus. And there's a spot right above it that we won't really see so well from here. It's a little bit, it's right behind the coracoid process here. And I'll show you the bone again in a minute, the detail of the humerus. But it's going to come down along the top of the humerus, and it's going to come down a little bit of a shaft here, a little bit of a groove. And this will be the long head of the bicep. The short head is going to come right off of the end of the coracoid process. Okay, so remember our attachment point for the Coracobrachialis. So we're going to come down here, and I'll clean that up here. And brachialis had its attachment point in the ulna. The biceps primarily will have its attachment point in what's called the radial tuberosity, this bump on the radius that we drew in. It's also going to finger over a little bit to the ulna, but it's really attached into the radius here. And then we're going to have a big belly for this muscle. It's going to come up higher than brachialis, and it's going to attach, going to mostly cover brachialis, and it's going to attach into our two heads off the coracoid process and coming up here off the supraglenoid cavity. Just sort of clean that up a little bit. That will be our biceps brachii. All right. From the side view here, so the long head is to the outside, the short head is to the inside. The short head would come off that coracoid process up here. The long head is going to come out of that supraglenoid cavity. It's going to, that little groove that's coming down on the arm, on the humerus, maybe we would see it just a little bit here in that groove, coming down and attaching back here just above the socket of the arm. But the short head's going to come off of that coracoid process. and come down like this. And then from the side view, we'd see a little bit of Brachialis, and again, the attachment point is down here in the radial tuberosity. So we'll see some of Brachialis underneath. Now the quality of the bicep, remember, the belly goes higher than the Brachialis. I almost feel like it kind of has an in and an out a little bit to it. So if I sort of clean that up a bit here. All right, on the radial tuberosity, biceps brachii. All right, let me see if I can show you this attachment point. Well, the two attachment points for the biceps brachii. So here's our coracoid process, part of the scapula. Here's the glenoid socket or cavity, and here's the supraglenoid spot where it's going to hook onto the long head of the tricep. So one's coming off of right here, that long head. It's going to come over the top, and you see that kind of groove right there? That's what it's going to come down. Okay, this is the long head of the biceps. And then the short head just simply shoots down from the end of the coracoid process like that. So I can try to show you on here, but it doesn't show up real well because we've got a removable arm. So, all right. So the long head is coming up here, and the short head is coming up here. This is going to the coracoid process. This is coming over at the top. You can kind of see how it's in that groove, showing that groove of the right there on the humerus. Okay, let's take on the back of the arm where we have the tricep. Tri meaning three, so we've got 3 heads to take care of. What they all share in common is a tendon that hooks into the beak of the ulna, if you remember that. It's got a medical term called olecranon. So it's the olecranon. So this will be this common tendon, and it I would draw it with kind of an angle going out, but it's really going to tie into this whole business of the olecranon of the elbow here, that whole elbow joint. All right, then we're going to have 3 heads to take care of. The medial head, being in the middle, medial, is going to run more or less in the middle here. It has an attachment point almost the whole way down the humerus here. So you can kind of just give it a nice big belly like that. That would be the medial head. Then we're going to have a head on each side of that. Okay, the long head of the tricep on our shoulder blade here, it's going to hook on just on the right along the edge, literally, of the shoulder blade, right beneath where the humerus inserts itself in the glenoid cavity. If you remember, here was teres major, then we had teres minor, and infraspinatus. Infraspinatus and teres minor in yellow here were hooking on the back of the humerus. Teres major was coming around to the front, and we talked about leaving just a little opening here. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to go through that opening there. This is where the long head of the tricep will hook onto the scapula, And it's going to come down on the inside of the arm. And again, share in that common tendon. So it's still the tricep. We're going to hook in right there, come down. And catch that tricep tendon. Okay, so we have the long head, the medial head underneath coming down, right? That's underneath. Then along the outside of the tricep, we'll have the lateral head. So that's going to swing out like this and share in that tendon again. The lateral head. So we'll talk about the lateral, just to name them for you. The lateral head, the medial head underneath, and then over here was the long head of the tricep. So we could draw that in over on the other side here too. Again, the common tendon coming up and out of the olecranon of the ulna. Okay. Middle head and the medial head coming down like this, attaching along the whole of the humerus. On the inside, we've got this long head threading through teres major and teres minor. And then we're going to have the lateral head coming down the outside here. So that tendon of the tricep comes up quite a bit. And you'll sometimes kind of see this divide here that takes place between the long head and the lateral head. It kind of has a bit of a feeling like that. Okay. So a little bit of the medial head maybe popping here, but that tendon coming up and taking on the long head. And the lateral head on the outside of the arm there. All right, on the arm up here, the front view, would we see a little bit of the tricep? Sure we would. We're gonna take care of that up here, but we definitely would have a little bit of the lateral head. That's on the outside, showing up, coming down here, coming down to the olecranon of the ulna. And we might have a little bit of the medial head here too. All coming into that tendon right in the elbow there, the elbow joint. Okay, so lateral head, a little bit of tricep there, medial head, a little bit of tricep there. I'm going to take this up a little higher. That lateral head's going to hook all along here. All right, that will be the triceps. Let's take on the side view here. Again, our common tendon is going to be attached into that olecranon, right, that beak of the ulna. That's going to come up, and we want to share off of that this tendon with the medial head the lateral head, and the long head. Remember, long head's coming off of the shoulder blade, so it would be coming out right here between the two teres muscles. Right in there would be the finger of the long head of the tricep. Right. And then it would have a belly coming out. And then we'd have the medial head showing up a little bit here. And then of course, all along sort of this outside here, we're going to have the lateral head. Let's see if I can clean that up here for a little bit. So here would be the long head where we would see it, and then we'll have the outside, the lateral head, take over there. And then we might have a little bit of the medial head popping through down here. But we can just color that all in, really. The tricep tendon, medial, lateral, long. Maybe just a little bit more. So what we have here that's really important is, remember the tricep extends the arm, the lower arm, and the bicep raises or flexes the arm with brachialis. So it's this divide between the two, right here, between the functions, where you'll be able to see most of more of a separation on the arm between the two functions of the muscle there, more of a line. Okay, let's take a look at the tricep here. We've got the long head that comes up and meets the scapula here. We've got the lateral head, which comes down along the side, divides your biceps brachii and the brachialis from the tricep, right, the extensors. And the medial head mostly underneath. They all come down and hit that common tendon, the tendon of the tricep there, going into the lacrinon, the beak of the ulna there. Okay, let's talk about a little muscle here on the back of the elbow called the Anconeus. And it's going to attach from, well, the back side here to the dorsal side, and also the lateral side, so of the humerus. So this is the lateral or the outside, and it's going to attach all along here, and then it's going to shoot down and tie itself into the lacrinon. Remember that from the tricep here? So it's going to come around and tie into that. So it looks so I can get a little brighter there. Something like that. And it's going to do a lot like the tricep. Okay, extend the arm back. Anconeus. We can draw that over here too. So again, the lateral epicondyle. So the olecranon of the ulna. That's the Anconeus. Next are the three radial muscles. They originate along the upper arm, and they really are responsible for a lot of the contour of the outside of the arm. And I think it's really important to realize that these muscles are attaching above and onto the lateral epicondyle of the humerus. So when you draw the arm, you don't want to just sort of bend at the elbow, but to really bring this mass of muscle up above the elbow, above the condyle here. Even this first one is called the Brachial Radialis. And if you want to get these guys to sort of pop, you can kind of, if you've got a table, you can push, kind of make a fist and push up against the table, but it's these muscles right here. All of these guys are hooked onto the lateral epicondyle. That means they're, if we're in the sort of medical position here, they're on the outside of your arm. And they'll come down and they'll hook first into the end of your radius and then into the first and second fingers here. So they're muscles that come across the arm like this, across the arm. And that's going to account for a lot of this rotation of the radius. All right, so maybe it's easiest to see it over here first. Brachial Radialis, it's going to come, so above, really above the epicondyle here, that lateral end of the epicondyle, on the humerus here, so between tricep and, remember, brachialis? So coming out of these two here is going to be the brachial radialis, and it's going to end here at the end of the styloid process of the radius, about there. So it's going to run up and insert itself between triceps, that lateral head, and the brachialis. So kind of right in there. Brachial Radialis. All right, so if we go over to the front view here, and the lateral epicondyle, so we're going to be hooking on the outside of the arm, behind, our green is our brachialis, so behind the brachialis, above the epicondyle more or less, and we're going to attach along the styloid process at the end of the radius here. So you want to feel that kind of come up and around the arm, and come down, and then climb up and outside and down. So the styloid process behind brachialis. So on this side here, we've got the arm turned forward a little bit. So we'll have, again, we didn't put on the biceps brachii. We put on the muscle underneath the biceps brachii, the brachialis. It's still going to go behind there on the humerus, but in front of the orange color there of the tricep, that lateral head. And we're going to come out, and we're going to come down, and we're going to attach to the styloid process there. Okay. Coming down to the styloid process. Okay. Okay, on the back view, we've got, let's take on this one first. Yeah, we've got the radius to the outside, sort of medical position here. So we want to climb up. We want to go behind the tricep and in front of the brachialis muscle. And we're going to attach right here. So we're gonna kind of come up out of there and down like this, and then feel that coming down, and that's the shape to it, okay? So we'll come up. Okay, something like that. Okay. All right. And then on this other side here, because the hand is rotating forward with the thumb coming forward, remember Brachioradialis is attaching on the thumb side, okay, which would be the radius side. So we'd still see it here, of course, because it takes that contour of the outside of the arm, but then it would be coming down and attaching down here this way. So let's color that guy in. But it would be tucking behind the ulna there. Making its way down to the front there, the styloid process of the radius. Okay, let's take on the second of these radial muscles. It's the Extensor Radialis Longus. So it comes with a long name. So it's an extensor, so we know that. It's coming down on the carpus on the radial side, and it's a long muscle. Well, why don't we come over here, take it on the side view first. It's still going to attach on the humerus along what's called the supracondyle ridge. So really above, just below the Brachioradialis, but it's going to come in, and this time instead of connecting at the styloid process, it's going to connect at the base of the what's called the second metatarsal. So for your index finger, down in the right here, and it's going to come up. Now all these muscles are very long tendon, and the belly of the muscles are up near the elbow. Hopefully you can kind of distinguish that there. All right, extensor, Carpi, Radialis, Longus. Okay, coming to the front view here, our extensor Carpi Radialis Longus coming down here along the base of the second metatarsal and shooting on up here. And it's going to tuck itself in just beneath our Brachioradialis. So this is the extensor Carpi Radialis Longus. Again, what's important here is it really helps to form that contour on the outside of the arm. Okay, so the same sort of story will be over here. Lower, coming around, and remember the hand's facing this way. So we're really going to get just a little bit here of extensor Carpi Radialis Longus, because it will come down behind at the base of the second metatarsal there. All right, and then coming over to the back view here, right next to the Anconeus here, up from that, coming along the supracondyle ridge, and then attaching right here, right, the hands facing this way. So it's an extensor, all right, coming up, and inserting itself above the elbow more or less, supracondyle ridge. You can see how these follow the form of each other, the Brachioradialis and the extensor, Carpi, Radialis, Longus. All right, and let's take this on this side too. So we'll see the extensor coming out here on that supracondyle ridge. It's going to come around here. Really, we're going to have other muscles here. So all it's going to do is sort of take over that contour there and come around for a little bit. But it's going to disappear behind because it's going to go down like that. Okay, let's take on the deltoid. That's up here in the shoulder girdle. And the reason we didn't do that yet was we had all these attachment points for all these other muscles. But now that we've drawn them all in, we're going to cover most of them up. The deltoid, well, we have the bicep, a two-headed muscle, the tricep, a three-headed muscle. The deltoid is a seven-headed muscle. And it has a real nice line to follow in the front here. As you come down from trapezius, remember how trapezius sort of came down and took up about that first third of the clavicle? You just want to continue that line down. And that's where the deltoid is going to attach all along that. Then it's going to travel around onto the scapula, and that spine of the scapula, it's going to insert all along the spine of the scapula too. And really all the way out to the end here. And then where it's going to come in is it's going to come in and insert itself about halfway down the arm. Okay, so you think about a lot of movements like this. So let's follow that here. We'll just draw it in. So along the spine of the scapula, and trapezius will cover the deltoid right there by a little bit. And then we're just going to think about hooking into halfway down that arm there. Okay? So we're going to swing down like that and come out like that. All right, we'll do that on the other side too. So we'll hook along here, come halfway down, and then come into the humerus there, up here along the spine of the scapula, and attach all the way along here. All right. Sort of clean that up so we can draw that in. So all this is going to go away now. So it's going to look like that, and you can start putting the heads on if you wanted here, but there will be 7 going around. Deltoid. Oops. All right, let's do the Same thing over here. So coming down, around and hooking in. Coming back in and hooking around in the middle here. We'll see that on the side view a lot easier. Okay, deltoid. So what I like to, and again, it's going to go tuck right behind trapezius here, okay? What I like for people to note about the shoulder then is you have the bump of the process here, the growing process where you have the spine of the scapula meeting the clavicle. So it's trapezius down, and then it's a bump, and then it's into the deltoid. Okay, let's take a look at the front view here. So we're going to just draw it in first. Following that, we have a little bit of a hollow here, but following that line of the trapezius coming down to about a third. About a third of the way across the clavicles here. And then we can pick up on that with trapezius. Just come on down, covering everything up here, starting halfway down the arm. Should we leave that one? Maybe. You can see underneath. So a convex here, along the clavicle, 7 heads of the deltoid, coming around there. Deltoid. So there's one convex coming down the arm, asserting itself. And then finally here, the deltoid coming down, following the line of the trapezius on the side view. And really what I would say I think works the best is just to feel like it ties itself in to the brachialis. You come in under trapezius here, but almost all the way back on the spine of the scapula. And then here you're going to see that D-like shape that the Greeks saw when they named this muscle the deltoid. So all of this is going to get covered up. So following the trapezius there, coming down, following the spine of the scapula, tucking right underneath the end of the trapezius there. And tying into the brachialis there. Deltoid. All right, the Brachioradialis and the Extensor Radialis Longus, they're what sometimes referred to as the ridge muscles because they come along the supracondylar ridge above the outside of the humerus there, that lateral epicondyle. The rest of the extensors, and there's still 4 more, but I think it's important, we can treat them primarily as a group here. Just remember that they share this common connection of the condyle on the outside of your arm, the thumb side, the lateral epicondyle of the humerus. Okay. So the first two kind of cross this ridge coming down. The rest are just going to kind of pull more of a straight down. So the first two, again, are a bit more oblique to the arm. And then the rest of these are going to run down with the sort of parallel with the lower arm. Okay, so the next one that would show up would be, again, just a little bit, but this one is going to run to the base of the third metatarsal. So your middle finger there. Again, the epicondyle on the outside here, the lateral epicondyle is where this muscle is going to pull off of. It's going to have a bit of a belly here, and it's going to come down here. It's going to get mostly covered up by the next one, but we'll put it in for a little bit here. This is the extensor, Carply, Radialis. Okay, here it changes, Brevis. Just meaning it's a shorter one than the other one. Okay. Here we might get just a bit of a line of it coming around. Here we're not going to see it. Here we might catch just a little bit of it going down to the base of that third metacarpal. All right. And then over here, maybe we catch a little bit of it too. That third metacarpal. Okay, let's go around here, come up. Again, we can have a little bit more of a belly here. This running a little more parallel to the arm than Brachioradialis and the Extensor Radialis Longus. Okay. Extensor Carpi, Radialis, Radials. And here. Next one we'll go after is the Extensor Digitorum. The Extensor Digitorum, still coming off the lateral epicondyle, what it's going to do is it's going to go right into these sort of almost joints here of the middle and distal phalanges of each finger from, you want to call it 2 through 5, everything but the thumb. Okay. So those are the attachment points. Epicondyle sharing that coming off the lateral epicondyle there, and this would probably have a little more of a belly to show here. And then it's very interesting because this one belly coming down here is going to split into 4 fingers. Still attaching out here in the lateral epicondyle. Extensor Digitorum. The extensor of the digits. Okay. So again, we might have a little bit of that showing up here again. And coming around down to the front side, hooking on all the way down, right, the 4 digits of the hand, except the thumb. Okay. Over here, we would have 2 through 5 sharing this extensor along the top. And maybe just Extensor Digitorum. And then on the, again, on that lateral epicondyle coming off here, coming down, a little bit of a belly. Again, hooking on right in here and right in here each time. Boom. The medial and distal phalanges. Extensor Digitorum. Okay, so there's another one that kind of blends with the Extensor Digitorum. It comes down off the lateral epicondyle again. It comes down and hooks into your little finger. Just for completeness, I'm going to put it in here. Again, coming off that lateral epicondyle, the little finger. This would be the extensor digiti minima. Because we're not seeing the little finger really clearly here or here, I'm not going to add it there. But there's one more to just kind of wrap up. So we've run extensors down all the way across the hand here. This last one is going to go to the, if you remember the first one we really ran, the extensor Carpi Radialis Longus obliquely came out of the epicondyle here and hit that first metacarpal. This one's going to hit the 5th metacarpal. And it's going to, again, come off that lateral epicondyle and base of the 5th metacarpal coming up. So in many ways you can see that this one runs up the ulna side, and then it would come over and catch that epicondyle. So it's called the extensor Carpi Ulnaris for the ulna side there. So we might catch that here again, coming off of this epicondyle on the outside and coming down to the, just right on the top, right on the other side of that 5th metatarsal there. Okay. All right, we've just finished up with the extensors, which is this kind of motion, which came up from the outside of our arm, if you will, get right in this kind of position, the lateral epicondyle, the thumb side, right of the humerus. We had a couple that followed the ridge, the Extensor Radialis Longus and the Brachioradialis. Those came over this way, right, to the thumb and then to the base of the first metacarpal. Okay, that allowed that kind of motion, and then the rest of the extensors just came down and hit all the fingers, hit the last finger here, right? But that's all from the outside of the arm. Now if we turn your arm palm side, now what we want to do to get this kind of motion with flexing fingers, wrists, and arms is we're going to pull everything off the ulna side. So there's, similar to what happened here, we're going to have one that comes down on the pinky side, one that comes down to all the fingers, one that's going to come down to the index finger. In fact, we have several muscles that go down to all the fingers here to be able to grip things. Okay, so extensors on the back side coming from the outside of the arm, flexors on the palm side, the underside, coming from the inside of the arm. So let's take a look at that. Probably the easiest to see that would be like on this front view here. So we have the Flexor Carpi Radialis, okay, and again, they're all going to share this in common, that they're going to come off the medial epicondyle. Okay, so that's the inside one, that's associated with the ulna side, okay? But up here on the humerus, the medial epicondyle, and we're going to come down and we're going to go to a spot right in here, right at the base of the first and second metacarpal. And we're going to pull that up. And then off of the epicondyle over here, we'll have a belly up here. And a long tendon down to the base of the second and third metacarpal. You start to see where we have a bit of a divide of the functions here. Right, here was the Extensor Radialis Longus and the Brachioradialis coming over, so the extensors, the supinators on this side, right, we begin with the flexors. And because this one is coming down to the radius side, right there, it's called the Flexar Carpi Radialis. Flexor Carpi Radialis. Now over here we'd see it a little bit, again, if we're hooking in right in here, the base of the second and third metacarpals, and we're coming off of this condyle over here, the medial condyle. Right, so we're going to attach here, come down, have a belly of the muscle, and then pull a tendon up. Okay. So this is the flexor side, this is the extensor side. Flexor Carpi Radialis. I guess we would, right now we'd show a little bit of that here, but let's wait for some others there. Finish that out. We would have, again, that second, third base of the metacarpal. So hooking in there, coming up through the carpus here on that medial epicondyle. You could have a belly here, and then coming down, okay, with the tendon. we're just not going to really see that probably from the Brachial Radialis is going to keep that from being seen. Okay, let's continue with the flexors. So we took on the first flexor, the Flexor Radialis, that came down on the radial side, and we went to the second and third metacarpal there. Now we're going to come down from up here, and we're going to go down the ulna side to the fifth metacarpal, the base right there. And we're also going to tie into the pisiform bone, which is that bump on your pinky side of your wrist, and also the hook of hamate bone here. We're going to tie into all three of those and come up here. So it will again, medial epicondyle coming down, big belly here, and then we're going to hook right into all three attachment points there. So because we're coming down the ulna side, this will be called the Flexor Carpi Ulnaris. Okay. Would we see that here too? Yeah, you bet. So medial epicondyle, grab onto that. Belly, whoops. Goodness. And we're going to hook right on the inside, right, the palm side of the wrist there. Hook a hamate, pisiform, fifth metacarpal. But we would start to see that coming up here. All the way up, catching that medial epicondyle. Right, ulna side, Flexor Carpi Ulnaris. We'll see that really well here too on the front view. Fifth metacarpal, pisiform, the hamate. So two bones in the carpus plus the fifth metacarpal there. And then we're going to hook on that medial epicondyle, belly, and tendon down. Extensor, Carpi, Ulnaris. Okay, let's take on one of these flexors that goes to all of the digits in your hand, except the thumb. And it's going to come all the way down to what's called the distal phalange of each finger, the very last bone. It's going to come down, and in fact, it ties into the ulna quite a bit as it goes up. This is a so we would see that right between our flexors that go to the fifth metacarpal and to the second one there. So between Extensor Radialis, Extensor Ulnaris. And again, this is attaching most of the way up the ulna there. Extensor Digitorum profundus. So that's a deep muscle. Okay. we would see that here with the thumb away from us. Again, from the distal end of each finger coming up between Flexor Carpi Ulnaris and Flexor Carpi Radialis. Going through that tunnel of the carpus, up underneath there. Flexor Digitorum profundus. Better change this. It's a flexor. Flexor Digitorum profundus. Then, really interestingly, we have another flexor, palm side, that goes to all the fingers except the thumb. But not everybody has one. 15% of the population, they say, doesn't. It's called the Palmaris Longus. And we'll talk about how all the other muscles are contained in a reticuloculum, like we did with down here with the legs. But if you want to see if you have this or not, maybe bring your pinky and your thumb together, and then bend your wrist a little bit. And if you can get a little pop there, as this Palmaris longus is outside of that reticuloculum, so the other ones are contained a little more. But if you can get one tendon there to really pop, then you've got it. Okay, but it's okay if you don't. So Palmaris longus, where would we see that? Oh, and then where does it attach? It attaches in kind of a fascia of the palm here. Okay, but again, just like all the other flexors, we're coming off the medial epicondyle. So we would come down here, and we would be attaching, that aponeurosis would be right in here. So it's just going to kind of tie into this whole area. And that is the Palmaris longus. We would definitely see that muscle here. So coming down, again, off the medial epicondyle, coming down and sticking out here between the ulna and the radial side of our Flexor Digitorum, our Flexor Carpi Ulnaris and Flexor Carpi Radialis. And then we kind of get into that aponeurosis of the palm there. Right in there. Palmaris longus. Okay, let's do the Pronator Teres. It's a muscle that's going to attach again on that medial epicondyle. It's going to come across and catch your radius about halfway down. And if you can kind of imagine it pulling, contracting, you're going to rotate your hand this way. It's called pronation, and your wrist a little bit too. Okay, so from the medial epicondyle, we're going to come across. Now it's going to hook along the middle of the radius there, but it's going to go behind our Brachial Radialis. So it's right in here where we would see it on the surface. But then after that, we wouldn't. So that's the Pronator Teres. And we would see that on this side too, be pretty similar. We have from the medial epicondyle coming down and then kind of tucking in behind here, behind the Brachioradialis. Pronator Teres. All right, let's go after the reticuloculums of the wrists. There will be one on the extensor side and one on the flexor side. They basically cover the carpus. They also include the styloid process of the ulna over to the distal end of the radius. So if you just sort of think about drawing a band across there, come down across the pisiform and triquetra, work your way over to this side, the scaphoid and trapezium. So just want to have a band really across the carpus here, up along the distal end of the radius, back down. Hypothenar. There we go. All right, so we can do the same thing across the carpus here, pisiform, styloid process, distal end of the radius. I swing down on this band a little bit. Coming around again. And over here we've got the distal end of the radius we can cover into the carpus. Okay. So you might recall the Palmaris Longus. If there's one present, it's going to go on the outside of the reticuloculum. All right. We want to tie the thumb in to the muscles of the arm yet. We'll take a little bit on the hand too. So if you remember, you've got three bones of the thumb. Okay, we have the first metacarpal, and then the proximal and the distal phalange. So what we're going to have is we're going to have an attachment point at the base of each of these bones for a muscle that runs into your arm and controls your each digit of your thumb. So the first one that goes to the base of the first metacarpal is the Abductor Longus. And so it's going to run under that reticuloculum. And then where it's going to come in is it's going to actually come in, start halfway up, maybe more than halfway up the arm actually. The Extensor Digitorum on one side and the Extensor Carpi Radialis brevis on the other. That's where we're going to insert these, let me just draw that line there. That's where we're going to insert these three muscles. Okay, and the adductor one is the highest, the Abductor Palesis. So what we're going to have the belly here, and then it'll become a tendon that goes. So it'll sit right in there. That's the, boy, I'll just write them over here. So this is the Abductor Palesis Longus. Then the next one up, the next two are extensors. The next one will hit that proximal phalange, and it's going to go up like that, come in here, and then same idea, right after the extensor digitorum there, it's going to pop out between that and the extensor carpi radialis brevis. So the next one is the extensor Palesis brevis. So if there's a short one, the brevis, then you can imagine what's coming up would be a long one. Right? So there at the distal phalange, we're going to put one more of these guys, come up, and again between the extensor digitorum and extensor carpi radialis brevis, we'll have this last one here. So this is the extensor Palesis Longus. All right, so over here between the extensor digitorum and the extensor carpi radialis brevis, right in here, we could start that from the first metacarpal, that base there. We could get that to come up. Okay, that's the extensor. And then we did brown next. The abductor Palesis brevis, coming down to the proximal phalange. And then the abductor longus, coming down to the distal phalange. On this side, we'd have it more to the outside, but we could bone, bone. Abductor Palesis Longus. Extensor Palesis brevis. Extensor Palesis longus. Okay, on the back side here, we'd have the abductor, the highest one here, coming between our extensor carpi radialis brevis and the extensor digitorum. So that's where it would come out here, between the sort of red and the pink. This is the abductor of the thumb. And it's going to go down to the first metacarpal of the thumb. And then we have the abductor Palesis brevis. That will go down to the proximal phalange. And then we had the abductor Palesis longus going down to the distal phalange there. All right, let's go after or review the lower arm muscles that we talked about. The main idea, of course, was that the flexors are coming off the ulna side here, and the extensors are coming off the radius side. But when I say that, I really mean the epicondyles of the humerus there. So extensors, flexors. Okay. Over here, we have these coming across here like this. Remember Brachioradialis and Brachioradialis, I should say, and Extensor Carpi Radialis Longus. Then we have the rest of the extensors here, the digitorum in the middle there, and the Ulnaris there. And then back here again, a little bit of the Anconeus in the elbow. And here's our flexors coming down, Flexor Carpi Ulnaris. And then, let's see, maybe we come over this side. Here's the Ulnaris again. Here's the Palmaris Longus. See how that's coming in front of the reticuloculum? And then here's the Flexor Carpus Radialis coming in here. And then we talked about the three muscles of the thumb that come out of the arm. We have the abductor, and then we have the two extensors, the extensor brevis and the extensor longus, coming down to each digit of the thumb there. All right, let's move on to the hand. The hand is, well, primarily bony and tendinous on the backside, and it's more muscular and fatty on the palm side. There's a lot of muscles to study about the hand. We've already taken on some of them. The muscle, the bellies of the muscles were up on the lower arm, and the tendons went into the hand. But what we're going to move into now are what are called the intrinsic muscles. These were the extrinsic, but the intrinsic ones are the muscles where everything, including tendon, muscle, everything is contained within the hand. And there's a lot to study, but there's three principal groups. And we'll just take on each group. Maybe I'll point out the main, the largest muscle in each group. But and it's interesting, they all kind of have a teardrop shape. Right here, this is called the Thenar group on the thumb side there, right? This padding here. It's also sometimes referred to as the ball of the thumb. On your pinky side, the padded muscular area here is called the hypothenar. Okay? And right here, where you can get the palm to ball up, is the first dorsal interosseous. All right, I think palm side here on the front of the figure is a great way to see two of these three muscle masses. So the thenar and the hypothenar. The thenar is going to be on the thumb side. It's going to come into the carpus here, and it's going to kind of come about halfway out across to the midline of the hand there. And then it's going to hook on at the base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb here. Okay. And we can kind of have that sort of shape to it. All right. So coming up here, down in here, see the kind of teardrop shape we get? This is the Hypothenar Eminence, or that rise there. On the ulna side, the little finger side, starting with the back in the carpus again with the pisiform, we're going to have the same idea where we'll come down to the proximal phalanx, the base there, and this is the hypothenar. It's not going to quite make it out to the midline of the hand. It's still going to have a teardrop shape to it. It's thinner and longer, I would say, than the thenar. The thenar, I think, is wider and more muscular. So this is the hypothenar eminence. Okay. All right, we would see the this hypothenar eminence on the back here along the sort of ulna side where we have the pinky, because the figure's facing away from us. All right, so this first one here, again, we'll start at the pisiform, and we'll come up and we'll catch that base of the proximal phalanx. So not nearly as kind of long and narrow, I guess. Hypothenar. The main muscle here would be called the Abductor Digitorum minimi, and it would sort of share an attachment point with that fifth metacarpal, the pisiform, and come up to that first, or that proximal, the base of the proximal phalanx there. Now we'd probably catch that over here too, the Abductor Digitorum minimi, that Hypothenar Eminence. So we're going to go after that here from pisiform on up. Maybe I get a little wide there. Pisiform on up like that. All right, the other one we can go after here that we would see here, and this is the back of the hand, that third muscle mass right in here, right, the first dorsal interosseous. And where that's going to attach to is the first, we're going to be in the carpus again, the first two bones of the carpus on the thumb side, the scaphoid and the trapezium. And we'll go up to the proximal phalanx again. Okay? And then we're going to go up, so we're going to attach here. We're going to come up about, 3/4 of the way along the second metacarpal here. And then we'll come back into the carpus. So the shape of this, again, is a kind of a teardrop shape. But we're going to attach across like that. Right into that base of that phalanx there, the proximal phalanx. So again, if we can sort of color that in. This is the first dorsal interosseous. E-O-U-S. All right. When we see that over here, we'd have a little bit of that first dorsal interosseous. Again, thumb side here, base of the proximal phalanx, coming about 3/4 of the way up on the radial side of the second metacarpal. So a little bit right in there, coming back down and attaching where the scaphoid and trapezium meet in the carpus there. Okay? First, dorsal interosseous. Okay, that first dorsal interosseous could actually help rotate the index finger slightly. So bring that up to the base of the proximal phalanx. When we have that show up here too, yeah, the first dorsal interosseous, again, coming up to the proximal phalanx of the thumb here, coming down into the carpus. So we're going to hit trapezium and the scaphoid. And then we're going to come up here along the second metatarsal and come across here like this. first dorsal interosseous. Two S's. All right. Okay, and then we'll have a little bit of the thenar muscle mass showing up too, right, the palm side. So we want to come up to that proximal phalanx. We're going to come down into the carpus. We're going to come down to where the scaphoid and the trapezium meet right here. Trapezium closer to the first metacarpal here. And we'll have a thin bit of that. Okay, so this is a part of our thenar mass. And if that little guy there would be called the adductor Palesis brevis, so the short adductor of the abductor of the thumb. Okay, and again, catch that rotation of the index finger. Just bring that up a little more web-like across there. There we go. I guess we might see a little bit of the thenar coming up here too, right? Coming out of the carpus up to the proximal base and over from the carpus like that. So hooking in between scaphoid and trapezium again, the two bones of the thumb side of the carpus. All right, so this would be thenar. This would be hypothenar eminence. Or if you wanted to call it the Abductor Digitorum, you could do that, and the Abductor Palesis brevis. This first dorsal interosseous is just the first of four muscles there. And there are other muscles that come in and tie between each of the fingers, but I think we'll let it go with that. All right, we'd also have a little bit of the thenar mass coming in on this side view of the hand with the thumb coming forward. We have that abductor Palesis brevis coming up along here, meeting the proximal phalanx and coming down into the carpus again, hooking onto the scaphoid trapezium joint there. This would be the abductor Palesis brevis. I have a favorite singer. His name is Bruce Cockburn, and he, in a song called One of the Best Ones, he talks about the 8 million mysteries in the naked body. And hopefully we've uncovered a bit of that structure for you today to help you hang your understanding of the figure, anatomy, to be able to draw what it is you see when you're drawing a person in front of you or the model, or you know, I think really becoming sensitive and caring about any one subject will allow you to bring that kind of empathy with you to whatever it is you draw, no matter what the subject matter is. Again, thank you for joining me. I appreciate your time. I'm glad you came along with me. Okay, take care.